There are some who might say, and I would say wrongly, that a student going to a teacher, a true teacher, that would somehow reinforce a sense of separateness that would detract from true awakening or to reality. It doesn't work that way. It amplifies the noise of ego that's already there in the student. And it's basically an offering to wake up. And the only way to wake up is to fundamentally recognize what the noise is, which is simultaneously a recognition of what stillness is, because you can't do one without the other. Truth itself is, and the teacher embodies that. And then the call is from and to the awakened condition. It's just, in the teacher, it's realized. In the student, it is partially realized. There has to be some degree of conscious recognition of what we're talking about for it to even make sense at all. So the call comes from within the student. But since conscious realization is one already, it's arising from itself to itself, from truth to itself. So when you hear a true teaching and something resonates within you at a deeper level, you're waking up a little. But what wakes up is truth itself, not the self. The self is like a noise or something. It's a resistance, sense of separation. It's like a tension bubble. And ego is a compulsive tendency to reify or make stronger or more real that sense of separateness. Basically, you're starting out with a sense of separateness. That's what ego is. It's not ultimately real, but it does make you and others seem separate. It may not seem that strong, and I guess in many people, that sense of separateness is there, but it's not seen as a problem. It's just sort of how life is. Well, for me, I wasn't okay with that. It felt like a sense of dissatisfaction. The first noble truth of Buddhism is usually translated as life is suffering, or existence is suffering, or to exist is to suffer, something like that. Dukkha means unsatisfactoriness, and it's just that sense that things don't add up, or there must be more. There's always a wanting more. The second noble truth says the cause of dukkha is desire. Because things are felt as incomplete, or you could say separate, like something's missing, we have a desire for more. That's where the desire comes from, is from a fundamental sense that things are not complete or whole, or they're separate from one another. So something's missing. When I started working with Richard, I was struck by what I would call an amplification of that sense of separateness and incompleteness. When you enter the field of a true teacher's work, when you enter the teaching and you're confronted, in a sense, by this person, when I spoke to him, I thought I had ideas that were important, or I had things to share, and I just sounded like an idiot to myself. But really only when I spoke to him directly. Sometimes it would be when I spoke to other students within the context of the teaching, but it's basically a field of awareness that doesn't judge. When you speak from a place of ego, I could say that ego's reflected back to you, but maybe it's more like you're playing a discordant instrument in a symphony, and because everyone else is discordant too, in this symphony of life that we're calling unconscious humanity or mass egotism, it's like noise. So when you're making noise all the time, and everyone else is making noise all the time, everyone's making their own different kinds of noise, you don't really hear yourself. you don't hear your own noise. In a sense, you hear your thoughts, but it's mixed in with everything else, and so you don't really notice it so much. When you're with a true teacher, it changes the signal to noise ratio. You're speaking into a field, I could call it silence. I could call it peacefulness. When you speak into that, you hear yourself as if you're used to playing in some kind of discordant orchestra all the time, and you don't really notice how bad you sound. And yet, if you were in an empty arena, all of a sudden the concert hall, which has perfect acoustics, has been emptied out except for you. And all of a sudden you hear you're playing and it sounds terrible. It always did, but you don't realize it until you're playing into that vast stillness. And sooner or later, you start to self-correct. That's basically what it's like. What would sound good in that place of peacefulness? An empty arena is very peaceful. It could seem lonely, or you're afraid because there's just all this space and emptiness. That's just the noise. So you hear that and you bring it back to a place where what would sound appropriate in this space, and it changes you because you're speaking differently. So that's what it's like. What's coming to me is something I might call the secret of inner listening. So you don't listen with your mind, you listen with stillness, or from or as stillness. So whether it's me or another valid teacher, I would say that you learn to listen into his or her essence. Byron Katie, for example, I've seen her, and I remember listening to tape recordings I had purchased back when we had cassettes. I was listening to her. This is when I was a student in Arizona. And I remember hearing her. I don't remember what the words were exactly. I heard where they were coming from, or as, or within. It's like the words aren't the point. It's the stillness that's the point. And that changed me. It doesn't have to be in person. The words do matter in some sense. They're more like pointers. It's stillness that is heard, and you hear it within yourself simultaneously as you hear it in the other. And there's a spaciousness. In the face of stillness, what you hear is your own separateness, your own mental content. And it's kind of like you're in a canyon and you're saying, hello, hello, and it comes back to you as an echo. And it helps you realize who you are in that moment. You're basically ego identified, because you'll hear fear, you'll hear tension, worry, anxiety, rigidity, whatever, arrogance. And you start to become aware, as you abandon some of this ego activity, it gets quieter, and then you start to hear a different quality. And a different quality gets reflected. It starts moving toward what I'm calling inner stillness, or listening, within, into, and as the stillness, little by little. And that is where we're at one. Whereas the noise just creates tension. If I'm noisy and you're noisy, it's like they're bubbles of tension that don't really connect because they're self-absorbed. Let's just say the self is made of noise. And when you show up to a true teaching and work closely with a group, with a true teacher, and those parameters are in place, the first thing is you notice how noisy self is, but in particular yourself. So ego, you start to notice yourself. And it's horrible. And I'm just speaking about my own experience. I really sounded like an idiot to myself. I mean, and it was obvious that that reverberated very loudly so that anyone within range would hear it. And it was hard because we tend to hide, and there's no hiding from that. And I was painfully aware that the teacher, who on some level I wanted to impress with my stupidity, I didn't realize that's what it was. I would say it, and not only was he not impressed, he was almost visibly irritated. I mean, I don't know. That was my imagination, probably. It was like, what a moron. Me. Oh, I'm such a moron. And yet, in that space, it was offered an opportunity to see that as just content. It's not who I am in my essence, it's just noise. It's like Shakespeare says, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury and signifying nothing. That's it. So I started to hear the idiot. And the idiot is really dumb and loud. When you start to hear that, some people just react and leave, or they don't want to see it. If you're willing to witness it consciously, there's a tendency to beat yourself up, and then you see, it's like you're asking the question, who is this that's beating up on self? And you realize that's just more self. So what happens is, over time, I couldn't stand that. So it started to get quieter. Why I like I said earlier, it's self-correcting. Imagine that maybe you're not playing an instrument, you're a radio broadcasting some god-awful racket, and it's turned up to 11, to reference a Spinal Tap, great movie. But you don't realize it because everyone else is doing that all the time. So you go to this workshop or this retreat, and you have a moment where you can speak to the teacher, and all of a sudden it's so still that in that space you hear that you sound like a blaring jackass. Oh my God, I'm broadcasting that. It's shocking. So you may not get it the first time, but eventually you just start to make adjustments. It has to do with awareness and the quality of your connection and your attention to what you say as you say it, and yes, who you are as you say it. So yeah, that starts to simmer down. So it's like the radio station, you turn it down to a point where you can hear it. I mean, having had the experience where something's so loud, like a TV, that you almost can't hear what's on there because you're like, turn that down. Why? So you can hear it. Which sounds counterintuitive. If it's distorted and blaring, you just cover your ears, you can't stand it. So you're like, all right, you turn it down and you get it, you adjust it. So like, okay, now what's there? What's the signal? And that's when you start to have more clarity about what your story is, because you can actually hear it. It's just like a radio that you would turn it down. And of course, you don't turn it so far down you can't hear it. You would turn it to get the optimum reception. Okay, what is it I'm hearing? And then maybe you tune it in a little more. What is this? What is this that I'm putting out? And who is it that's putting it out? What is this? And then you start to realize that it's like a station where every other beat is no, 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 no. It's resistance. It's saying no to everything, to any real music or magic, just shutting it down. You turn the no down so you almost can't hear it. You squelch it down a little, and then, so what is that? I could say it's spaciousness or stillness. It's a yes, but it's not a verbal yes. It's a space between the notes. And then if you turn the no back up a little bit, you'll realize just a little, maybe this beat that's going, no, 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 I don't want this. That you realize it's actually saying no, K-N-O-W. How does one know what stillness is? Well, one way is to see what it isn't. Ego is a turning away from or a shutting down of reality, as well as a shutting down of a relationship with others. It's a turning away, a turning inward, a shutting down, contraction. So in this example where you're hearing a radio station where you tune it in and you realize it's just this tendency to saying no, that's what meditation is like in a way. You start playing with the signal and looking at it, and then the clearer you get about what the no is in a way that doesn't judge. So it's quiet. When you're in meditation, you're seeing the thoughts arise. They're like flowers or something. It doesn't matter if it's a violent thought. If you are in a conscious relationship with it, it's not a problem because it's held consciously, and it actually does attenuate that signal in a way where you can just see what's there. When it's turned up really loud and it's cacophony, you don't realize that you're basically shutting down or pushing away or rejecting all relationship. You don't really hear it. Well, when you get clear about it, you start to see that there's a space that surrounds those notes of no, if you will, those beats. And as the stillness arises, it's a kind of cognition, but it's not conceptual. I like to call it recognition. It was and is always already present as stillness. Within and as stillness, thoughts are seen as empty. They're nothing of themselves. They cannot stand on their own. It's a movement within stillness. When the student asks a question of a spiritual teacher, it implies there is a real student asking a question to a real teacher. We are real, even as individuals. It's just not ultimately real. There is a difference between ultimate truth or reality and relative truth or reality, or you might call it conventional truth or reality. If I'm a student coming to a teacher, if I'm ego-identified, to that extent, I'm going to seem or feel to myself like a separate person. You know, that is real in a conventional sense, in a relative sense. Working with Richard, he didn't say all is one and you're already free. I don't remember him saying those words. He is that. He is that. He started out talking about relative things because that's where we start. Real world things, like did everyone arrive safely? Not there is no one to arrive and nowhere to go. It's ridiculous. It can't be described anyway. So to try to describe it is often a mistake. I mean, I try to use words for it, but it's really we're listening into beingness. We're listening into each other as stillness. So beingness, stillness, these are just words. It's spacious and it's quiet. It's liberating if we can allow it. It's a deep kind of work where it's really impossible to hide. Well, it's possible to hide from yourself. I saw it when I was working with him. I saw people who would refuse the gift that was being offered in different ways, and I was astounded by that. I'm still astounded by it. For myself, I trusted him, and I felt that there was a deeply caring core or essence, or I mean, I say stillness and it sounds like it's nothing, or it sounds like it's not What is that? What is stillness? How could you describe a deeply caring stillness? Isn't there noise? No, there's not. I would get this reflection that I was making all this noise, and so that eventually subsided a bit, and I started listening more into what was being offered, which is stillness and a relationship with that. And to the extent that one is in relationship with that stillness, as that stillness, by varying degrees, deepening degrees over time. It would be like there's a concert going on that's more or less noisy, but it might be okay. It's people talking, stuff going on. It could be just the typical sort of hubbub of life. And let's say it's an outdoor concert or something, and then you get distracted and you look and you wander off to the edge and there's a flower. And in the midst of the noise is this beauty and stillness that is other. And it was always there. And wow, and beyond that, there's a field and mountains and trees. And it's another order of depth that's going on at the same time that the noise is going on. Once you wake up, you basically see through these illusions, these selves, to ultimate truth, where there are no forms. It's called the formless for a reason, but it's quite beyond description. That doesn't mean that you don't, in some sense, still witness and function in a world that is defined by separateness, conventionally speaking. The mountaintop realization of awakening is complete seeing through all form, all these notes of unhappiness, of no, of rejection, of ego. It's all seen through, and then there's just stillness. Stillness is recognized. And then coming down the mountain after that, like now, I have a deeper realization that self and selves and all the things of the world, the things that seem separate, are part of a dance that includes, it's like a vibration. It's on and off, up and down, high and low, and that there is no separation, but the sense of separation, if we embrace it consciously, is something that we can use to, in a sense, know who we are in a deeper way. And it doesn't ever stop or end, because there's no end to infinity. There is no end to beingness. And that the only way to know something is to know what it's not. So you're being a person, an apparently separate individual, and yet within that stillness, within the recognition of that oneness, because you've seen through the forms, you know that the separation is a lie. You get it. You don't know it as a concept. So there's conceptual cognition. You don't know it in that way. It's recognized fundamentally as being itself, truth itself. And then it's all good. Yes, there are other people and things and animals and plants and food and experiences, life and death, pain and pleasure, freedom and restriction, all of those things. And yet within that recognition of oneness, it's wonderful. It always is. I could say it always was, but there's no time. It is now. That's the party. And when you wake up as the fundamental reality that makes such a thing possible. But there isn't a party without music, in some sense without noise. It's just now you know what noise is. Now you know what the notes are. Now you know the stillness between the notes that supports it and makes it possible. So if a student is coming to a true teacher in order to wake up, i.e. be free of ego, it doesn't cause or create separateness, it reveals it. So it reveals it in the student as a compulsive and frankly disturbing and ugly sort of boundary that hasn't really been seen before in the person and can be shocking. Ego is a compulsive attachment to separateness. I could say to self, but that's what self is a sense of separateness. Since ego is compulsive attachment to that, you cannot not do it. So waking up means that the ego dies, the ego goes away, and whatever self remains is no longer compulsive. There's no more compulsive attachment to it. It also reveals a healthy boundary. The healthy boundary is exemplified by the teacher and whoever else is there who might exhibit more consciousness in those aspects of their psychology. So I'm saying it mirrors stillness as well as healthy boundary. It's not like some kind of cosmic goo. It's actually, when it comes down to it, it's healthy functioning, healthy living, and healthy dying too, but we'll save that for another conversation.